The purpose of this learning module is to provide an overview of the Community Rating System program, known as CRS, including eligibility requirements, classifications, and discounts, and a summary of CRS activities. The purpose of the CRS is to provide discounts for flood insurance premiums to communities that perform voluntary programmatic activities that earn points towards the program. The goals of the CRS are to reduce flood losses, strengthen and support insurance aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program, and promote a comprehensive approach to floodplain management. Simply stated, the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP, is a federal program enabling property owners in participating communities to purchase flood insurance protection against losses from flooding. Participation is based on an agreement between the local community and the federal government. However, there are many programs and tools available through the NFIP to assist other federal agencies, states, and communities with mitigating flood losses. The Community Rating System is a program for communities that implement higher floodplain management standards. It provides an opportunity for communities to obtain a discount on flood insurance policies for their residents by recognizing additional efforts to reduce flood damage to insurable property, strengthen and support the insurance aspects of the NFIP, and encourage a comprehensive approach to floodplain management. The discounts can also vary depending on the location of a property in a community. To find out if your community participates in the CRS, you can contact 1-800-427-4661 for more information. An Insurance Services Office Incorporated technician responsible for reviewing community requests for the Community Rating System classification and verifying implementation of activities credited by the CRS. The name and telephone number of the ISO CRS Specialist for a state can be found at www.crsresources.org/100. The communities that participate in the CRS have the following responsibilities: designating a community CRS coordinator, someone who is familiar with the community offices that implement CRS activities, cooperating with the ISO CRS Specialists and the verification procedures. Verification procedures are located in Section 230 of the manual. Recertifying each year that it is continuing to implement its activities. Information regarding recertification is located in Section 213. Advising FEMA and its ISO CRS Specialists of modifications to its activities. Keeping elevation certificates, old firms, and old flood insurance studies for as long as the community is in the CRS. Keeping the records iterated in the activities documentation section until they are reviewed at the verification visit. Ensuring that flood protection projects and drainage system maintenance activities are compliant with federal environmental and historic preservation requirements, Section 507, and participating in the cycle verification process. Communities will receive periodic updates to the coordinator's manual and other CRS materials. They are encouraged to order background publications, attend CRS workshops, and ask their ISO CRS specialists for help in understanding their CRS credit criteria for their current and planned activities. No fee is charged for a community to apply for participation in the CRS. The only costs the community incurs are those of implementing creditable floodplain management activities and the staff time needed to document those activities and prepare for and participate in the recertification process and verification visits. There are many benefits to participating in the CRS. Most of them cannot be measured in direct dollar terms, so it's impossible to conduct a strict numerical comparison of the benefits with the costs of implementing the credited activities. Listed here are the benefits more commonly mentioned by community officials. The benefit that attracts people to the CRS the most is the reduction in flood insurance premiums for their residents and businesses. The dollar savings varies according to the CRS class, the number of policies, and the amount of coverage. Although the premium reduction attracts interest in the CRS, the most important benefits are the enhanced public safety, reduction in damage to property and public infrastructure, avoidance of economic disruption and losses, reduction in human suffering, and protection of the environment provided by the credited activities. Through the CRS, a community can evaluate the effectiveness of its flood program against state and nationally recognized benchmarks. Training and technical assistance in designing and implementing credited flood protection activities are available through the CRS at no charge. The table on this slide illustrates the CRS classes and discount. In order to receive a discount through the CRS program, a community must have at least 500 points to be ranked as a Class 9. As a community earns more points, a community can reduce premiums for its residents. A Class 1 community can receive up to a 45% discount. The table also illustrates the premium reduction for properties in the special flood hazard area and outside the special flood hazard area. For example, a Class 9 community has the same classification for a property in the special flood hazard area and a property outside the special flood hazard area. However, for Classes 8 through 1, properties within the SFHA receive a higher discount than those outside the SFHA. The table on this slide, titled Credit Points Awarded for CRS Activities, summarizes the activities that a community can receive CRS points, the maximum possible points, the maximum points earned, average points earned, and percentage of communities credited. These activities are discussed in later segments of the presentation. Maximum points possible are based on the 2013 Coordinator's Manual. The highest points were determined by the credits attained by a community as of October 2011. Growth adjustments and new credits for 2012 and 2013 are not included. There are 7 sections in the CRS Coordinator's Manual. Section 110 is a program overview. Section 200 are the procedures for applying. Section 300 are public information activities. Section 400 contains mapping and regulations. Section 500 outlines flood damage reduction activities. Section 600 covers warning and response. And Section 700 includes community classification calculations. There are 6 prerequisites to become and stay a Class 9 or better community. They include being in full compliance with the minimum requirements of the NFIP, receiving credit for maintaining FEMA elevation certificates, and meeting repetitive loss criteria. In order to become and continue to be a Class 9 or better, a community must demonstrate that it has enough points to warrant the class and meet the following 6 prerequisites. The community must have been in the regular phase of the National Flood Insurance Program for at least 1 year. The community must be in full compliance with the minimum requirements of the NFIP. There must be correspondence from the Regional Office of the Department of Homeland Security's Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, stating that the community is in full compliance with the NFIP. The community must maintain FEMA elevation certificates on all new buildings and substantial improvements constructed in the special flood hazard area after the community applies for CRS credit. If there are 1 or more repetitive loss properties in the community must take certain actions. These include reviewing and updating the list of repetitive loss properties, mapping repetitive loss areas, describing the cause of the losses, and sending an outreach project to those areas each year. The community must maintain all flood insurance policies that it has been required to carry on properties owned by the community. The community's chief executive officer signs the verification visit cover sheet, which includes a statement that the signer certifies that the community has all the flood insurance policies that it has been required to maintain on properties owned by the community. In order to be a Class 6 or better, a community must demonstrate that it has enough points to warrant the class and meet all the Class 9 prerequisites and have received and maintained a classification of 5 out of 5 or better under the Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule, or BCEGS. Both BCEGS classifications, residential or personal and commercial, must be a Class 5 or better. This program measures a community's building code adoption and enforcement procedures as they relate to natural hazards mitigation. A Class 4 or better community must demonstrate that it has programs that minimize flood losses, minimize increases in future flooding, protect natural floodplain functions, and protect people from the dangers of flooding. Even though it may not have enough points, a community that cleared most of the buildings from its floodplain with disaster assistance funds after a flood cannot be a Class 4 or better if it does not have an effective regulatory program to prevent a recurrence of the problem. In order to be a Class 4 or better, a community must demonstrate that it has enough points to warrant the class and must meet all the Class 6 prerequisites, have received and maintain a classification of 4 out of 4 or better under the BCEGS, demonstrate that it has taken appropriate steps to eliminate or minimize future flood losses. To do this, a Class 4 or better community must receive credit for the following CRS activities. Activity 430, Higher Regulatory Standards. The community must show that it enforces higher regulatory standards to manage new development in the floodplain. Activity 450, Stormwater Management. The community must receive the following credits for its Watershed Management Plans, or WMP, under Section 451B, including but not limited to points for managing the runoff from all storms up to and including the 100-year event. Activity 510, Floodplain Management Planning. The community must have adopted and be implementing a floodplain management plan that receives at least 50% of the maximum credit under Activity 510. Obtain the prerequisite points from one or a combination of the following elements that credit protecting natural floodplain functions: natural functions of open space, prohibition of fill, additional map data natural functions layer, managing the volume of stormwater runoff, low impact development, watershed management plan, erosion and sediment control, water quality, and a natural floodplain functions plan. Document the following life safety measures. Obtain some credit under Activity 610, Flood Warning and Response. Have a map of all areas protected by levees and an inventory of the critical facilities that would be flooded if the levees were overtopped. Have a map of all areas that would be flooded by the failure of each high-hazard potential dam and an inventory of the critical facilities that would be flooded. In accordance with Section 113D or the User's Manual, the community may propose alternative approaches to these prerequisites that are more appropriate for local conditions. The prerequisites for a Class 1 rating in the CRS include: meet all of the Class 4 prerequisites, meet the minimum standards of the NFIP as determined by a community assistance visit conducted by FEMA within the previous 12 months, promote flood insurance as a vital way to protect residents and businesses from the financial impact of a flood. This is demonstrated by having at least 50% of the buildings in the community's special flood hazard area covered by a flood insurance policy, or obtaining at least 50% of the maximum points under Activity 370, Flood Insurance Promotion. Demonstrate that it has a no adverse impact approach to floodplain management. A no adverse impact approach to floodplain management is one in which the action of one property owner or community does not adversely affect the flood risks for other properties or communities. To join CRS, a community must submit 1. A letter of interest that states that the community is interested in joining the CRS, designates the community's CRS coordinator, and states that the community will cooperate with the verification process. 2. Documentation showing that the community is implementing activities that warrant at least 500 points. This can be done by using the CRS. Approval from the FEMA Regional Office for the ISO CRS Specialist to visit the community and verify the creditable activities. The community may propose alternative approaches to these prerequisites that are more appropriate for local conditions. The ISO CRS Specialist, the initial verification visit to review the community's programs and activities. The specialist collects the needed materials from community staff. Before the materials can be processed, the ISO CRS Specialist must have the following 4 items. Where appropriate, documentation can be provided digitally. 1. Correspondence from the FEMA Regional Office stating that the community is in full compliance with the minimum requirements of the NFIP. 2. The CRS Program Data Table with lines 7 and 14 completed. 3. Documentation for each element where credit is desired. Sections 310 through 630 have documentation sections that itemize what is needed. The ISO CRS Specialist reviews these with the community during the visit and collects what is needed. Section 231 reviews how documentation should be provided by the community. 4. A certification signed by the community CEO that certifies that it is implementing the activities of the NFIP. If a CRS community retrograded to a Class 10 for whatever reason, it may reapply to come back into the program as a Class 9 or better community. Such a community must submit a complete new application according to the Coordinator's Manual currently in effect. It may not submit a modification or documentation just to correct the problem activities. Each year, a community must recertify by October 1st that it is continuing to meet the prerequisites for its class and implement the activities for which it has earned credit. Each August, the ISO CRS Specialist sends the community a list of its credited activities. The community must note whether it is still implementing each item on the list. The following provisions apply to modification. A cover letter and the documentation needed for the credit are submitted to the ISO CRS Specialist. The community must use the credit criteria of the Coordinator's Manual in effect at the time the modification is submitted. A community's CRS classification cannot change more than once a year. Therefore, only one modification can be processed over a 12-month period. The community must also have submitted a recertification by the previous October 1st. If a community is modifying an activity previously applied for, its submittal must include documentation for both the new elements of the activity and those that were previously credited, if still being implemented. The ISO CRS Specialist verifies only the activities being modified and reviews the rest at the next cycle verification visit. Communities are encouraged to submit materials at any time for review by the ISO CRS Specialist. Communities maintain their credit points according to the Coordinator's Manual in effect at their last verification visit until the next visit. Annexations or flood control projects can impact a community's credit points. New development can also impact credits. The CRS activities are divided into 4 series. 300 series are public information activities. 400 series are mapping and regulations. 500 series are flood damage reduction activities. And 600 series are warning and response. These series are the subject of the 4 main section of the Coordinator's Manual and recognize community efforts to inform the public, prevent future flood damage, address existing flood problems, and prepare for flood emergencies. It should be noted that within each series there are 3 to 7 activities. Within each activity there are 1 or more elements. For each element, element, there are one or more variables. Each series has from 3 to 7 activities. Within the 4 series, there are 19 CRS activities. A community may select which activities it wants credit for, with 3 exceptions. Activity 310, Elevation Certificates, is a prerequisite for all communities for participation in the program. Activity 510, Floodplain Management Planning, is a prerequisite for Category C repetitive loss communities. If a community wants to proceed to be a Class 4 or better community, it must have credit from certain activities to show that it has a program that addresses all the goals of the CRS. At the end of the credit calculation process, the credits for all activities are added together to get the community's total credit. Classification for a community is done in 5 steps. Step 1, Element Credit Points. Step 2, Impact Adjustment. Step 3, Credit Calculation. Step 4, Community Growth Adjustment. And Step 5, Community Classification. The ISO CRS Specialist calculates the community's credit points after each verification visit. A community may calculate its own credit points by hand or using the CRS calculation software. A community may also use the Quick Check to estimate its credits and work with the ISO CRS Specialist to more accurately calculate credit points. All credit points calculated by a community are unofficial and are verified by the ISO CRS Specialist. The final verified points are determined by the ISO CRS Specialist. A community may submit alternative approaches to the list elements. They will be reviewed by ISO and FEMA. The community must demonstrate the impact of each alternative approach for the activity. This concludes our CRS Basics Learning module. For more information, please consult our other CRS Learning modules or contact the Risk Communication Specialist at the Kentucky Division of Water.